Adam, it's good to be here. I'm so excited to talk to an anthropologist because something my team and I have always been saying is that we're really good at letting humans be humans. So, for someone who studies humans and human behavior, I can't wait to have this conversation with you. Hmm. Hmm. Mm, wow. Well, that's a big question. Where do I even go with that? What is it to be human? I think is a great question in lieu of the AI that's coming down the pipe and how it's going to change. It's already changing certain uh, cognitive and executive functions that we can now rely on the AI to do. So, where's the place left for humans, or what is unique about us? Because it's not just about doing anymore, or it's not going to be about doing. We'll have robots doing it for us. Or so I think that's a great question. And what comes up for me, at least in this point, is humanity. Like, what does that even mean? But for me, it's that it's humanity is not something that's in us, but it's what's between us. We are animals. Um, But when we get together, and the fact that we can get more than 150 of us together, and that we can all subscribe to a certain idea or story and communicate ideas across large swaths of populations and do things together, something that no other animal can do. So, what makes us human, or is the fact that we can achieve humanity? What is humanity? And that is something that I think is intrinsically what's between people, not within us. So then the question is, how do you cultivate that humanity? And one thing that I've seen over time is just, we're also blessed with this ability to communicate verbally, articulate ideas and emotions and experiences and perspectives. We can utilize that skill to create humanity between us, a sense of humanity. And what I mean, if you're just listening, what is this guy talking about? Look, you have a fight with your partner or with your best friend. You talk it out, and when you talk it out afterwards, you feel a sense of connection with the other person because you've been through the storm. You've weathered the storm. You now trust them more. You now are committed more to them because you had a conflict, you dealt with it, and now actually you've made up. And now your relationship is that much stronger, that much more resilient. And that's what I mean by a sense of humanity, you know? Hmm. Hmm. Okay. Mhm. We don't live in a vacuum. Even if you're alone in a cave meditating, you're not in a vacuum. Why? Because you're talking to yourself. And even the practice of meditation is not talking to yourself. It's letting go of all the voices that come up and letting go. It's a practice of letting go. It's not a practice of being silent. It's a practice of letting go. So we're never in a vacuum, even when we're alone. And what is predicates this space between us, in my opinion, are the questions we ask. Any type of interaction is predicated on a question that's asked. So you're working together with a coworker. Okay. Well, you're at a meeting. The meeting is about something. How do we increase sales? How do we, you're with your partner at home. You're talking about the dishes. Are you really talking about the dishes or are you talking about something else? Talking about the trust. At the end of the day, what every conversation is predicated around a question, but we're not conscious of the questions we're asking. And that's like take home value of this right now. We're 6, 7 minutes in. Listening to this guy with a great name named Topaz. What's his experience? His experience is that I've sat and I've watched over 1,200 different humans have questions, 1,200 pairs. So that's 2,400 humans have conversations, deep, cathartic, intimate, profound ones. And that's a privileged position because where do you get to see that? Where do you get to see real, honest conversations? And from that experience, I've learned how to create the space that's important, and we could talk about that, and B, how to construct the questions. How do you construct really good questions? But even pulling back further, what's my learning? You ask, like, what's really surprised me is that we're always asking ourselves questions. You wake up in the morning and you say, "Oh shoot, I got to do that today." You don't realize that "Oh shoot, I got to do that today" is actually an answer. It's not a thought. It's an answer to a question. You're conscious of the thought as an answer, but you're not giving presence to the question preceded that answer, that preceded that thought. And the question shapes the answer. So focus on the question. If you wake up in the morning and go, "Oh shit, I got to do that." Wait, stop. Why am I even thinking that thought? I'm answering the wrong question. I'm going to ask a different question. In today's busy day, when I know there's going to be a lot going on, what's the gift that I can derive? What can I learn? Where's the opportunity in today's challenging day to make one special moment? And then you'll be thinking about that answer versus, "Oh, shoot, I got to do that today." Yeah. Mhm. Well, one obviously is the fact that you're listening to this podcast and maybe this idea sparks a thought, but right. Number one is, just being aware of it and then stopping yourself, taking a breath and saying, wait, okay. And by the way, I have three different methods I use for creating really good questions, and we could talk about that. You know, but you get good at what you practice. And for human history, we've been practicing at least since in the industrial age till now, we have been trained to give results, to do. And now we're in a new age with AI coming out, which AI will do it. So that begs a new position for us, which is more about being asking the questions because There is a lot of power in asking the questions, which is also one reason why we're not really taught how to ask questions. Sometimes you hear, "Oh, I want to teach critical thinking at school." Okay, you're taught critical thinking, but who's thinking of the question of what around which you're applying your critical thought to? That question itself is more profound than the act of critical thinking because it shapes what where you're focusing your thought and your mental powers and acumen towards. But if you change the question, it already assumes different things. And I what is a good example? A good example is there's many tricks that you can suppose in constructing a question. Um, how is conflict making us better? So now you're not looking for an answer why conflict makes us worse or why do we have so much conflict. You are shaping an answer that positions conflict as a benefit, as an opportunity. That's a great deal of power because you're shaping it. So if you look at like a lot of our political debate, a lot of the questions are always either setups for success or setups for total failure. And the values are already embedded in the question before the answer is set. It's either a law ball for a home run hit because the question sets up is aligned with the values of the politician representing, or it's against them. And regardless of how they answer, they've already lost because the question shapes their failure. Right? There's a disalignment in the values. So one gift that I've gotten from this amongst many is the awareness of shaping questions, the power of shaping questions, and take home value. Whenever I'm stumped on something, anything, whether it's something with a relationship or something in my personal life, and I'm just find myself banging my head against the wall and can't figure out the answer to a question, I stop and I go and I reshape the question. I put all the energy into reshaping the question instead of putting energy in trying to solve the answer. Just change the question, and then the answer becomes more obvious. So, very simple example, basic example. Should I dump this person? Okay. Then your mind's like, should I jump? Well, yes and no, shouldn't yes, no, ta 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 ta. And your head, and you don't really know. There's so many positives and negatives, and you don't know if you're missing. Okay, stop. Shape a new question. And usually when I do this, I like brainstorm 30 questions, and there's three fields you fill in. One is the time frame, one is how it makes you feel, and then the third field is how it makes other people feel. So you come up with 30 to 50 brainstorming questions. In the next 6 months, what can I do that makes me feel vital and inspired such that I contribute support to my family? What can I do in the next 2 years that makes me feel challenged and uncomfortable such that I can grow and contribute to causes I find important? Whatever it is, you come up with 30 of them and you circle the one that's most engaging. And then you answer that question. And then that question. So let's say you come up with, what can I do for the next year that makes me feel emotionally vulnerable and challenged such that I can be intimate with whoever, like find new levels of intimacy with whoever I'm close to. Oh, all right. Now you answer that question and you'll know whether you should dump the person or not, right? Dig deeper questions. And so whenever you're stuck on an answer, you can't figure it out, create a new question, a deeper question. Then the answer becomes obvious. Mhm. Can I can I ask you a question? You've seen the ant, right? Some of the videos of the ant. As anthropologists, what do you see when you see those? What are you seeing? I'm really interested. I was looking forward to having this conversation because I always sit there and I'm like, this is amazing. This is like humans being humans. Where else? It's like a zoo without the zoo, but it's a real place where people come in and have an opportunity to have a real, incredible conversation they wouldn't have otherwise. So it's a wonderful, like, human experiment, if you will, of witnessing. What do you see when you watch that? Mhm. Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Right. Mhm. Yeah. Isn't that becoming more difficult? Like younger generations to sit down and because they're not as well practiced and they're utilizing this technology and it's like I mean, what I found in doing these podcast rounds with for the book and everything is that and it's quite beautiful. It's like, wow, okay, we're taking an hour and a half to have a conversation with no distractions, and we're having the art of a conversation and seeing where it leads to and asking questions and listening. And it's something that I mean, that's why I kind of really enjoy podcasts now because there is this long form conversations. And compared to all the other media that we get, which is just actually as short as possible, right? That's right. 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 Mm. Yeah. But there's something to be said when you're doing it synchronously versus asynchronous, where you're sending a voice note to somebody and then they send a voice note back to you and it's async. And that is something that I see a lot, but it is a different kind of conversation. It's like a recorded monologue sending back and forth, which has its place. But I think there's something also about seeing the face of someone else. And I know this is not for everybody. So I was on another podcast where the person had ADHD and they said, I have to turn off the camera because if I see you and I'm watching you, I'm gonna have a really hard time focusing because I'm gonna be looking at everything in the frame. I don't know if you have that problem, but you're right. Okay. But for me, I find that for me, I have found that I need to see people's faces and reading off their faces to know where we at in the conversation. And I had a call the other day when it wasn't, and I found, wow, okay, this is a different experience. And it's challenging for me. And I realized how challenging it was. That I just had to listen. I couldn't tell if they were feeling it, if it was making sense, if it was resonating. And I was looking for other clues, right? Which would be pure auditory versus the image. And I think that's what's really powerful about both doing the and watching the and is that you're not necessarily listening to the words, you're watching the interaction of the space between. Space between is the and. The and is a conjunction of us. You and me, us and them. That's the and space between. And I think that's also watching over 1,200 of them has also made me very attuned to micro gestures of the face. You can imagine, right? And like picking up all these, and my editors have the same thing. After a while, they start being very aware of the people they speak to in their own lives. They're picking up all these little micro gestures of the face because, again, what you get practice at, you get good at. We are editing these, we're watching these, we're putting them out in the world, and that really attunes you to picking up people's faces and the space between words. Totally. Right. So here's like I don't know, some sensei response is that it doesn't work. It doesn't need to work. We don't even ask that question. It's just be. So if the question is how do you make it work, that means presupposing something needs to happen for it to work. If there's no way it can work because it is what it is, then it is what it is, and it is. And what I mean by that is when we train directors to hold a space, and I get a call. My director, says Topaz, day one in Paris didn't work out at all. They're not crying. And it's like, that's because your agenda is you expect them to come in and it only works if they cry. But humans are humans. And what we're recording here is we believe that's something to learn from every conversation. So let's allow humans to be humans. And whatever is, is. And what's beautiful about the format is because you're showing for everyone listening, when we filmed the end, we filmed with 3 cameras. We bring two people into a room who have some kind of relationship. We give them questions to ask each other, and then we edit it. And you always show either a triptych, so a wide shot and 2 close-ups, or a bipanel, which is basically just 2 close-ups. So regardless of what they say, there's a conversation being had in your mind as you're watching. There's a question asked, and then you're thinking as a viewer, ooh, I bet this is what I would say if I got asked that question. That's the first conversation. The second conversation is, ooh, I bet this is what they're going to say. I suppose from the way they look or the reaction, this is probably what they're going to say. And then number three conversation is actually what they do say. And the space between those three different conversations is where there's a lot of exploration to be done and reflection, right? Because you see yourself in the conversation. You see who you are, you see who you're not, you see who you want to be, who you could be, and who you don't want to be. And it's a wonderful medicine for each other when we share a bit of our relationships and our vulnerabilities with each other in this format. And in that sense, my team and I we feel very privileged and honored because in some sense we have this powerful format. This creates deeper listening and empathy. But it can basically work like there's as many stories as there are grains of sands on the beach. You bring any two people in a relationship, and even if they don't answer a single question, because the rule is part of creating a safe space, albeit an uncomfortable one, is that you say you have to read every question, but you don't have to answer it. And so therefore, even if they don't answer every question, those three conversations are still going on. What would I say? What are they going to say? Then you hear what they say, which is, I don't want to talk about it. Take a pass. Isn't that interesting? And all the projections are still happening. So it's actually, so in that sense, it's a wonderful, powerful format. And we don't have, in order for it to work, we cannot have an agenda. And that's part of creating the space. Creating the space is to have an intention, which is where you begin from, but don't have an agenda, which means where you want to end at. So for those who are in relationships at work or with your loved ones or family, if you go to someone, or let me do it simpler, if someone comes to you and asks a question that they know the answer to, and you're not wondering what the question is, the answer to the question, you're wondering why they asking me this, right? And so you're playing a political chess match. You're not really engaging with one another. If someone comes and say, listen, my intention here is to open to the space and I'm curious about these things. I don't know where we'll end up, but I want to have exploratory conversation because this or that. Okay. Now we're exploring. And in the setting of the intention of where you're coming from versus where you're going creates a space of more safety, albeit it could be uncomfortable. We should not confound safety and comfort. They're two different things. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I, I I think it's really helpful in any environment to be clear about what are we doing in this space. And a very simple way of remembering that is, look, you don't cook in the bedroom and you don't sleep in the kitchen. When you're in the kitchen, you know what you're doing there. When you're in the bedroom, you know what you're doing. It's different. It's built for different things. Do we articulate the rooms we are in the homes of our relationships? What is this conversation about here? Are we having a conversation to explore our feelings around this? Are we having a conversation because we need to make a decision? At the end of this conversation, we have to make a decision, decide how we're going to execute it. Are we having a conversation here because one person is hurt and wants an apology? What kind of conversation are we having? What space are we in the home of our relationship? And articulating that. And then And how that makes it safe is that it articulates what are the actions that are permissible, what's expected. It gives permission both to give and receive because that's what we do in the space, right? I start cooking in the bedroom. It's like, what are you doing? This action is not permissible, right? I start getting ready for bed in the kitchen. You're like, "What? You gonna sleep on the floor? This doesn't make sense." But we don't do that when we have conversations. But I think also, to some extent, at work and in relationships, but that just doing that is super helpful, you know? Mhm. Mm. So, I mean, the filming part is, technically it's not complicated. But what is interesting, and I think this is take home value, is I cast the crew for their presence. How do they feel? So I don't bring a director of photography who has a big ego and makes it about them, because then they're going to say, or, they might say, okay, rolling camera. Okay. Or no, no, stop, stop. I want you to tweak the light and this and that. It's like, wait, these two people are having a deep conversation. Or a sound person who's concerned about, okay, if there's a plane or something goes by or a scratch, you're not going to run in. We're not going to ask them to do it again. Because the most important thing here in this space is not the technical, it's the well being of the two people having the conversation. And that's number one, respect. And so, therefore, when I cast, it's not technically difficult, but I need people to know what they're stepping into and I need to feel their energy, because it cannot be about the crew. It's about the people stepping in. Right. And so, I, if you will, for like, I select the crew for people who have the energy, that have the humility to understand that there's a greater project here and that we are in service to it. Right. And I also am very aware from my years of directing films and doing interviews and such, is that the interviewee, the person being interviewed, reflects the interviewer. So generally, you're in a documentary, you're asking questions, you're putting them on camera. If you, the interviewer, are nervous, they will be nervous. If you're combative, they will be combative. If you're jovial, they'll be jovial. They mirror you. The worst thing you could tell someone you're interviewing is calm down, don't be stressed. Because all you're doing is you're being stressed about them being stressed. Instead, you should maybe drop the F bomb or say something funny. Or if you want them to be vulnerable, you be vulnerable. They reflect you. And so part of creating the space for the and when we film it is us being us. Is us being us. I tell the producer, look, if this is your first time on set, don't pretend like you've been on 30 of these. You tell them that the truth. This is your first time. If you're having a horrible day, you tell them you're having a horrible day. You be you, because by you being you, that sets a permission for them to be them. And that's what we want, because that's what's worthwhile sharing. Right. But but the truth is, like, we sell card games, as 15 different types of editions for all kinds of relationships. And the card game alone creates a space because it's a game. Right. And that creates a space for an incredible conversation. You don't need to come on set to have an experience. You can play the card game and have an experience. And there's a very simple reason for that, because the game creates a space. If you go home today and your partner says, Adam, why do you love me? And you're like, wait, what? Where is this coming from? You're not thinking about why you love your partner. You're thinking about, where did this come from? I just got in the door. I get to take off my, what happened? Why are you asking me this? Vice versa. You come home and your partner comes and says, Adam, you mean the world to me. You're so important to me. You've moved me. You've changed me. I'm so grateful to you. You're not accepting that. You're not receiving that. Why? Because you're wondering, where is this coming from? The space hasn't been created. Now, on the other hand, you pull out a card game, 200 decks, questions in deck, and and your partner comes, hey, Adam, let's play this game. Okay. He or she pulls out the card, and they pull out the card. It says, why do you love me? Oh, okay. So the question of why are we doing this? Where's this question come from? That's been answered. The space has been created. Space has been created for you to give an answer. Space has been created for them to receive or for you to receive. And so we need an artifice to create the space, to get permission to answer the questions that get in the way of us actually having an experience. Right. Yep. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. It's random. Yeah. I mean, the card game has a different experience. It's more like a tarot card. You pull it out and it has its own order and it has its own magic. There's also in the function of 12 questions for love, which is basically, look, Topaz, the editor said, Topaz, what have you learned? Uh, Jill's a fan of the Skin Deep for years, and she called me up one day and she said, out of the blue, what have you learned from doing this for 10 years? What are the meat and potato questions? How does this work? How have you been able to get such intimate, cathartic conversations? And so I distilled that all into a book. So 12 Questions for Love is a guide to intimate conversations to deepen your relationships. And what I've learned, at least in the context, is that there is a power to an arc, to a story arc, right? To a 5 act structure. And so I talk about that and how we do that. And the card games themselves work more in a tiered manner. I mean, you have your journey there. And then the 12 questions for love is here's a structure upon which to follow, which we do apply when we do productions. And that that basically like is like building the architecture of an experience, right? You build the base first, which is about trust, respect, love, and what brought us together. So you have questions that hark to the past. Those are the first 3 questions. Act two, the next 3 questions are about conflict, right? And like we start leaning to that slowly. What are you hesitant to ask me and why? Or another version of that is, what are you hesitant to tell me and why? So we talk about hesitancy. Then we talk about, hey, what's the biggest challenge we have in a relationship right now? And why do you think it is? Right? What's the biggest challenge right now that we're facing? Why is it? What is it teaching us? Okay. And then the 6th question is, when was the last time I disappointed you and how do you feel about it now? Or what is left unacknowledged between us and why? Right? This is something that was a challenge that one of us solved and didn't address and kind of took it in. And the line between a gift and resentment could be simply acknowledgement. It's something that we put aside that we don't talk about. So we're exhuming, kind of exploring, if you will, challenging conflict in a relationship. Now we go to act three, which is the peak. We've worked our way up to the base of trust, respect, and like what brought us together and the unique experiences we created with the first 3 questions. Then we go into how we explore different forms of conflict. Now we go to the climax 3, which is, what's the pain in me you wish you could heal and why? You know, number 9 is, what's one experience you wish we never had and why? And there's a lot to be said there about the relationship between those 2 questions, but that's basically like the climax. And then we go to questions 9 and 10. We're starting act 4, which is starting to land the plane, and we're talking about gratitude. We're talking about, what are we teaching each other? What are we learning from each other? Because at the end of the day, whatever you're going through, this person, whether it's your brother, your best friend, your partner, right? They're there with you. They're present with you, and they can reflect a lot about what you're experiencing in life, and you can share a lot of what you experience with life. So let's acknowledge that. And then the last 2 questions is to kind of heal up the conversation and to really ask the things that are aware of the fact that we don't live forever and that we don't know when the end is. So let's talk about the end, which is, if this were to be our last conversation, what's one thing you never want me to forget and why? And then the 12th question is, why do you love me? Right? It's like, That's always a good one to ask. Absolutely. We also have, and I think 11 is like, what's one experience you can't wait for us to share and why? So while in the beginning we build on the past, this is about the future. Where are we going together? What are we building together? And so there is an architecture to that. And we do that with all the experiences that we build. There's always an architecture. There's a design, which is how things feel and look and move, but there's also an architecture, which is how are the building blocks structurally put together. That's why I have a mouthful. It's like Topaz is an experienced design architect. And I was like, what the hell is that? Why not just experienced designer? Because there's also an architecture, and it requires both to be really successful. You need the architecture as well as the design. Yeah. Hmm. 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 Which is like for me, I just want to point out because there's a beautiful nuance there to that, which is having the end now, which is when you're making a decision or thinking about something or asking yourself a question, if you change your perspective on that, you say, okay, what should I do now? Okay, if you do that from now, if you just say, okay, if I go 30 years from now, not even my deathbed, if I go to 30 years from now and I look back at this moment, what would that person tell me to do now? I promise you it'll be a lot more courageous than choice, right? A lot bolder, a lot more vulnerable, a lot more courageous, no, without doubt. So that's really helpful sometimes. Is to change the perspective upon which you look at it. Don't look at it from now. Say, okay, the Topaz 10 years from now, the Adam 15, 20 years from now, the Adam in 6 weeks from now, looking back at this moment, what what do they suggest I do? Right? Mhm. Totally. Or the past. Or the past. I mean, I think about Steven Spielberg directing Abraham Lincoln. Now that becomes the story about Abraham Lincoln instead of whatever was before, right? I mean, the power of narrative control does have a strong effect on how we see things and take things in. And so there is a great deal of responsibility on the storyteller and power, right? Because of that, because of the power you yield by the fact that that becomes a version of reality. And so I think, go back to you asking about the end and how we do it. We at our team, we do see what we're doing as an anthropological experiment or recording. Yeah. And it has two functions. One is for the present day, so that people watch these conversations and some people realize, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who's facing this dilemma or has this issue. And whoa, look at the different way they handle it. oh, there's a possibility here, or this is possible. And two, which is long term, which is for our grandchildren, so that they can look back at the year of the great pandemic and see what was going through in people's relationships. They could see what was happening, the election. They could see what was happening. We have an archive for the last 11 years. And it's an amazing project to have. And we're committed to that. And so that it gives us a level of integrity that we don't edit things to be salacious. We're not editing things for views or engagement. We're editing things for integrity and value. And that's what, and fortunately, we've been able to sell enough card games that we can make this business model work, and that's been a really gift, but it's also such an honor. And so that's what we're focused on, is just creating that kind of value for the long term so that there is a nice record of the anthropological, I don't know if it's the anthropological, but human behavior, you know, as a record of how people were relating and communicating about their emotional experiences through via relationships. Yeah. 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 Totally. Yeah. And also to own it. I mean, I tell my editors, as much as this is documentary, it's also fiction because you are taking our conversation and you're cutting it down to 10 minutes, 12 minutes. So we do need to take responsibility for the fact that this is not a full edit. Like, you are editing it. And by virtue of editing, you are changing the reality of the conversation we've had. So the question we need to ask ourselves is, where's the value here? What's the story here? What's the moral? Not the moral, but like the fate, like every fable has a moral. Like, what's the take home value here from this conversation that we could share with a wider audience, right? And take responsibility for that. Like, and sometimes, frankly, we could cut a lot more salacious content for sure and get a lot more views. But what's the point of that? Then everyone in the comments is going to be talking about why this one person's a prick, and they're not going to actually be looking at what's there to learn here. So we actually protect that person and mold it in a way that, benefits, like, here, there's a greater lesson here, and don't be distracted, right? Don't be distracted by the things that, and that's what a lot of our content is. It's distraction by fear and fury because it's spread, and so, and that just gives us long-term longevity and integrity. That's why people come and share more and more vulnerable stories with us, because we built that trust and integrity. And fortunately, we haven't had to risk that, you know? Yeah. Man, it took me, I don't know, 6 years and a lot of pain and and a back surgery and depression to figure out how to make a business model that worked and to get through my own ego of what I thought, of what worked. And it's been a long journey. And fortunately, so far, and it's been painful, things ebb and flow. And sometimes you're doing really well, and sometimes you're not, and you have too many operating expenses and you have to change. So it's been definitely a learning experience, and I've grown a lot as a human being from that. Um, I'm just grateful that it works. And I know it works because every time we do a production, people fly in and do it, and then they participate. And we don't pay anyone to be on the end, and they fly themselves in to have this experience, and then they tell us about how, because we've been around now in our 11th year, we're near the end of our 11th year. We're starting the 12th next year, which is amazing. People say, listen, the relationship I'm in now is informed by watching Ben and Sidra 8 years ago when I was in college. And now I'm 25 and I'm married to the person that I love, and we have an incredible and we play the card games because we practice, emotional articulation and communicating our relationship, deepening it because we understand the value of it. And I would never have been in this position if I wasn't informed by watching that honest, vulnerable conversation that Ben and Sidra had, or this other conversation, Andrew and Keisha, or whoever it is, or and that's how we know we've offered value. And for us, um, we take that with obviously gratitude, but also responsibility to then say, how do we do more of this? Right. Yeah. Yeah. But it's hard sometimes because we haven't had it come up. It's only been one time actually, but where someone has a perception of themselves and how they want it represented in real life. So then they want it to be edited to live up to how they want to be presented, but that's not what it is, and that's not where the value is. That's only happened once, and thankfully it has never happened since. Oh yeah, it's incredible. You know, um, and we are also aware that we're almost playing with, a very potent. That's why ultimately this whole project is predicated on people's courage and their vulnerability. So when we won the Emmy, the first thing I said is thank you to the courage of the participants, because this is all based on that. The book and the learnings and the questions, it's all based on people who had the courage to step into a space and trust us to share themselves. And then we take lessons from that we distill out, and we offer that to via the book or the games to just help improve relationships and and mental health of anyone who playing it, because the sharing of your life experience is actually very helpful in the right environments. Yeah. 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 It's a great question. I don't know. I mean, I haven't done like a study with like a proper research study on what that is. Yeah, yeah, you exactly. Well, we want to apply the and offer and do that, and, like, actually start utilizing this format to actually do is, like, what actually happens in the human body or in the brain or in the when you have these connective conversations? How do these conversations affect the mental health or depression or recidivism rates of people who are incarcerated if they have these play these card games with their partners who are outside of jail, and then like how does that affect recidivism rates? We want to apply this and bring some good research, so we're looking for partners to do that. um all I know is just seen some incredible conversations of humans that have conversations that I couldn't have. Yeah. um And I don't know where that I don't know where that comes from. It's just sometimes I just constantly being moved by the courage of the participants, and then I know that I'm affected by it because it informs how I then relate to my partner, to my family, to my friends, to my children, and that informs that, and it helps me improve my ability to communicate and share a bit of myself with others. Yeah, yeah. Well, we just haven't analyzed it. We haven't broken it down, and if we had a researcher who said, "I wanna test this out," we would be more than happy to give the data set over, and let's look and see what the trends are, see what the differences are, and see if it's a controlled data set or not, and I'm down we're looking for that, we're actually that's the phase that we're at now that we're in our completion of the 11th year. It's like, how do we learn greater lessons from this, in research? Great. Yeah. Nice. Nice. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Thank you. Cool. Adam, thank you for having me on, man. Thanks for this opportunity to share it with you and your audience.